The awakened demonic samurai heads to kill the powerful shaman, but turns into an inferno of flames before spiraling into the sky. It all starts when Lee Hwarim, a powerful Sharma who works together with her apprentice Bong-gil, is invited to Los Angeles by a wealthy Korean real estate investor named Park Yi-young. Park Yi-young's son suffers from an unexplainable illness that has defied medical treatment, and through recommendations, he employs Hwarim to find a solution. Upon getting to the hospital, Hwarim and Bong-gil meet with the baby's mother, who's skeptical about the whole arrangement, but she eventually allows them to meet the baby. After being left alone with the baby, Hwarim senses that the problem is linked to their ancestors and that other sons in the family suffer similar problems. She tells this to the baby's mother, who immediately informs Park Yi-young. Hwarim and Bong-gil go to meet Park Yi-young at his mansion in the U.S. Park narrates his family's ordeal to Hwarim and Bong-gil. He tells them about his wife's multiple miscarriages, how he had lost his senior brother to suicide, and how he hears screams each time he tries to sleep. Hwarim tells him that the root of the problem is from his grandfather, who's experiencing discomfort at his grave. The only solution is to dig up the grave and either relocate or cremate it with the service of an expert. As soon as Mr. Park agrees to the solution, Hwarim and Bong-gil travel back to Korea and meet up with Kim Sang-deok, a professional geomancer, and Elder Go, a mortician. Hwarim tells them how rich Mr. Park is, and they immediately agree to dig up the 100-year-old grave. She recruits their service, and on an agreed date, they go together with Park Yi-young to check out the grave before the digging day. On their way to the gravesite, Sang-deok sees a temple signpost at the side of the road and gets worried. He expresses how unsettling the area is, but they continue to drive into the hilly forest. The gravesite is located in the northern part of Gangwon Province. They arrive at a part of the forest and park their cars to continue the journey on foot. As they climb the hills, Hwarim asks Sang-deok if he has ever seen a grave at the top of a mountain, and Sang-deok responds that it is uncommon to find a grave on a mountain. As they continue to climb the hills, Hwarim sees a group of foxes far away. She senses danger, but continues to walk up the hill. They get to the foot of the mountain and find a plain grave. Kim Sang-deok tastes the soil around the grave, but immediately spits it out. As they look around the grave, Elder Go comments on how North Korea can be visible from the area. Meanwhile, Sang-seok closely studies the grave and gets unsettled when he discovers that the grave is unnamed. He questions Park Yi-young on the history of the grave, and Park reveals that a monk named Ji-sune decided the burial location for his grandfather over 100 years ago. According to Park, his grandfather had made great contributions to the country, and so he was buried in such an uncommon place. And since grave robbers were a common problem, the grave was kept plain to discourage robbers. Sang-deok comments that the monk's name is bizarre and announces that he won't dig up the grave. As he leaves the forest and gets into a car, Hwarim asks him his reasons for refusing, and he confesses that a grave buried in such an area should never be meddled with. He also points out that he had also seen the group of foxes on the way to the grave. Fox and graves don't mix, which makes the whole situation bizarre. Park Yi-young invites Hwarim and Sang-deok to his home and emotionally persuades them to dig up the grave. Hwarim is moved by his pleas and joins in persuading Sang-deok. Hwarim suggests a ritual to absorb the negative energy from the grave while digging. Sang-seok reluctantly agrees, but warns that the whole process is dangerous and that there is a missing detail about the history of the grave. The next day, Park Yi-young and his family arrive at the foot of the mountain for the exhumation. Hwarim and Bong-gil arrange for the ritual by finding 5 pigs and 5 laborers, born in the year of the pig. They start the ritual by redirecting the negative energy from the grave to the dead pigs. The ritual continues till sunset, when the laborers find a coffin. As Sang-deok examines the coffin, he finds out that the coffin is made of juniper wood, a material only used by royals in the past. They successfully excavate the coffin and prepare to leave, but the group of laborers stays back to clean up the area. As one of the laborers searches the soil, he finds a snake with a human head and immediately beheads it with a shovel. The snake makes a scream that only Hwarim and Bong-gil hear. As soon as the snake dies, darkness covers the mountain and it begins to rain heavily. Sang-deok recommends that they reschedule the cremation, since cremating on a rainy day can cause the deceased to not find peace in the afterlife. Park Yi-young reluctantly agrees, but instructs that the matter be kept private. He also requests that the cremation be done without opening the coffin. Although Sang-deok finds this strange, he agrees and passes the information to Elder Go. Elder Go drives the coffin to a mortuary and bribes a staff to take in the coffin without filing a funeral report. While cleaning up the coffin, the staff comments on the quality of the coffin and says that it must have belonged to a high-ranking official. Elder Go warns him not to interfere with the coffin and goes to have lunch. Feeling troubled about the excavation, Sang-deok makes a visit to the Boguksa temple and meets a monk at the temple. He asks about an ancient monk named Gisune, but the monk at the temple does not know the name. Sang-deok also inquires about the unnamed grave at the top of the mountain, and the monk reveals several rumors he had heard about the grave. According to the monk, there are rumors of treasures buried at the grave. Due to this, several grave robbers had attempted to rob the grave, but to no avail. The monk takes Sang-deok to a storeroom and shows him all the properties of the grave robbers who had attempted to rob the grave. Meanwhile, as Elder Go leaves the coffin to have dinner, a mortuary staff sneaks in and tries to open the lid of the coffin. Hwarim and Bong-gil walk in to see it. They attempt to stop the staff, but it's too late. The lid had been opened, and the deceased spirit escaped from the coffin, causing Hwarim to fall unconscious. Back in Los Angeles, Park Yi-young's disabled father hears the voice of his father, which is the spirit telling him to open the windows. The muddled-headed father opens the window, thereby letting the spirit in. The spirit strangles the father and eats his liver. Park Yi-young's mother in another room is also strangled and killed by the spirit. Hwarim is taken to the hospital. At the hospital, she immediately informs Sang-deok of the development and tells him that the spirit harbors hatred and will hurt its family. She plans a ritual where she channels the spirit into Bong-gil's body. As soon as the spirit possesses Bong-gil, she questions the reason behind its hatred, and the spirit reveals that it felt wrong for being abandoned, and it intends to take the life of its entire generation. It escapes from Bong-gil's body, causing Bong-gil to throw up blood. At the same time, Park Yi-young receives a call from Sang-deok, who tells him about the recent development of the grandfather's coffin. While Park Yi-young speaks on the phone with Sang-deok, he hears a knock on the door by the person claiming to be Sang-deok. Park Yi-young is confused, but decides to believe Sang-deok on the phone. The Sang-deok on the call instructs him to move away from the door and open the window. As soon as Park opens the window, the spirit gets in and possesses him. The real Sang-deok opens the door with the help of a hotel staff. As he gets into the room, he finds a possessed Park Yi-young standing erect while facing the window. The possessed Park Yi-young begins to sing an old Japanese war anthem. Sang-deok calls for an ambulance, as Park Yi-young continues to act strangely by gulping down multiple bottles of water. When Sang-deok tries to communicate with him, the possessed Park Yi-young responds by saying the phrase, "The fox has broken the tiger's spine." He proceeds to snap his neck afterward. To prevent the spirit from causing further havoc, Hwarim, Bong-gil, and Elder Go rush to cremate the coffin. They seek approval from Park Yi-young's aunt, who reluctantly agrees to cremation. Immediately, the coffin is cremated, and the spirit vanishes before hurting the baby at the hospital. Days after this incident, everything returns to normal, and the baby shows signs of improvement. One day, Sang-deok goes to visit one of the grave laborers. The laborer complains about having sinister dreams and confesses about beheading a weird snake at the grave site. He also begs the Sang-deok to perform a ritual for the snake. This motivates Sang-deok to revisit the burial site at the top of the mountain. He pours salt on himself as protection and begins to dig the grave deeper. As he does this, a group of foxes come out to watch him. Sang-deok ends up finding the weird snake and accidentally discovers another coffin underneath. As he digs deeper, he finds a strangely huge coffin buried vertically and immediately informs Bong-gil, Hwarim, and Elder Go. Together, they pull out the coffin and discover iron chains tied around the coffin. Sensing danger, Hwarim warns them to ignore the coffin and return home, but Sang-deok insists on getting to the root of the matter. They drag the coffin out of the forest and drive to the Boguksa temple. They beg the monk for a space to keep the coffin, and the monk frees out a space in the storeroom. Hwarim surrounds the coffin with glutinous rice and horseflood as a precaution. They also invite Park Yi-young's aunt and probe the history of the grave. The aunt claims ignorance, and Sang-deok reveals the real identity of the buried grandfather. Park Yi-young's grandfather was a Korean trader who sided with the Japanese during the war. As punishment, he was buried at the foot of the mountain. Hearing this, the aunt reveals that the gravesite was decided by Japanese monk Gi-sun, whose real name was Murayama Junji. She also promises to pay them to take care of the whole matter. As she leaves, the crew performs a ritual for the snake and decides to cremate the huge coffin the next day. Everybody falls asleep, but a worried Hwarim calls a friend to find out more about Murayama Junji. She discovers that Murayama is a powerful yin-yang master known as the Fox. She gets scared and calls on the spirit of her grandmother for help. Later in the night, Bong-gil is awakened by his sleep paralysis but breaks free. He decides to look around the temple but finds a huge, strange creature strangling the monk. He rushes to Hwarim and alerts her. As they run to check on the huge coffin, they discover that the creature in the coffin has broken free by piercing through the ceiling. Bong-gil runs back to alert the others. With Hwarim alone in the storeroom, the huge samurai finds her and questions her in Japanese. Hwarim pretends to be his subject, but the samurai sees through her axe and reaches out to strangle her. She narrowly escapes, and Bong-gil rushes to save her, but he gets captured. The samurai stabs into his body to extract his liver. After injuring Bong-gil, the samurai turns to capture Hwarim. But as he approaches Hwarim, the day breaks, and the samurai turns into a ball of fire and floats away into the sky. Bong-gil is rushed to the hospital and given treatment. While at the hospital, Hwarim reveals to Sang-deok that the samurai had a shadow and left a footprint, which meant its spirit was tied to an object. Sang-deok goes back to the temple and searches for clues in the items left by grave robbers. He finds a picture of the grave robbers and deduces that they are not ordinary grave robbers. He also discovers that the Japanese, with the help of monk Murayama, had trapped an iron stack to the ground to block the Koreans' feng shui. The samurai acted as a guard, and Park Yi-young's grandfather had been buried in the area to cover up the scheme. Sang-deok reveals his findings to both Hwarim and Elder Go, and the crew decides to lure out the samurai from the grave to pull out the iron stack. Hwarim also discovers that the samurai had avoided parts of Bong-gil, tattooed with scriptures, to ward off evil. With this discovery, the team covers themselves with tattoo scriptures and heads to the burial site with buckets of sweet fish and horseblood. Hwarim uses the sweet fish as a trap to lure out the samurai from the grave, while Elder Go and Sang-deok go in search of the iron stack. At exactly 2 a.m., the samurai awakens from the grave and follows the trail of sweet fish. As he walks away from the grave, Elder Go and Sang-deok begin to search for the iron stack, but to no avail. Meanwhile, Hwarim distracts the samurai by claiming to be the spirit of the mountain. When the distraction wears off, the samurai attacks her, but she's saved by the spirit of her grandmother. Hwarim runs to the gravesite and meets Elder Go, who tells her that they can't find the iron stack. As they contemplate the next course of action, they see the samurai in the form of fire going towards the gravesite where Sangdeok is. The samurai captures Sangdeok and stabs into his body. To save Sangdeok, Hwarim and Elder Go pour a gallon of horse blood on the samurai. But this only saves a little time. The samurai returns and captures both Hwarim and Elder Go. As he attempts to strangle them, the injured Sangdeok gets hit with a realization. The iron stack had been injected into the samurai's body, and according to the feng shui principle, wood can be used to fight metal, and water can be used to fight fire. With this knowledge, Sangdeok struggles to stand on his feet. He finds a wooden stick and applies his blood to the stick as water, and as soon as he hits the samurai with this the samurai falls and vanishes. At the same time, a hospitalized Bongil, who had been controlled by the spirit of the samurai, recovers. Sangdeok gets rushed to the hospital and fights to stay alive to witness the wedding of his only daughter. Bongil quickly recovers, and everything returns to normal. Sangdeok attends his daughter's wedding and sheds tears. Hwarim continues with her shaman job, but is often traumatized by the incident with the samurai.